Hi, woman beings. Thanks for joining us today. We are here to talk about the quite controversial film Cuties, which is trending right now with the hashtag cancel Netflix. People are very upset. So we're going to dip our toes into this one. Welcome to the Woman Being Podcast community,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
So I woke up in the middle of the night at around 4 a.m. like a week ago. And I did as anyone does and started scrolling through Instagram, and I discovered this trending hashtag called cancel Netflix. And I was seeing all sorts of friends, mostly Christians, posting cancel Netflix. We don't support the exploitation of children. We're not going to be a part of this. And I went and I started researching, looking into this film, and I was just initially very angry because in general, I think there's a dismissive culture among Christians where we are willing to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, essentially. And so I wrote like a bunch of angry feelings about it. And then I texted these gals at like 5:57 a.m. and I was like, we're going to do a podcast about this. So you're welcome. This is
the product.
This is the product.
Here we are.
My midnight rantings, but I think it's really important to talk about and to discuss art and film and hard topics and where the line is when it comes to using children for the portrayal of actors when it comes to using children to portray a story. So first off, I wanted to start off with we went and watched the film, by the way. So first off, I wanted to start off and hear from you about what your initial reactions to the film were.
Honestly, I really enjoyed the film. Just going from like an artistic standpoint and from a message standpoint, I thought it was really inspiring. And I thought it was really, really well done. And it was also inspiring to see a director who is a woman of color, a woman of multiple cultures, making, I think it's her first feature film that she's ever made, and she shows a lot of promise in that way, and I thought that I related to the message of Cuties a lot, and saw a lot of myself in the main character, Amy, I believe is her name. I'm not going to try to say the director's name because I tried to figure out how to say it all morning. It's like Mémonet de quoi.
It sounded beautiful.
I know no French. So, I thought that it was really, really, I felt very sort of almost like represented in that movie in a lot of ways, from like showing these experiences that very young girls are exposed to. That's sort of my small bite of what I felt about it initially.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I came from it, my initial experience of the film was that I loved it as well. I thought it was actually really incredible and really well done. And it's speaking a very important message that I think society needs to be aware of and engaging in actively. I came out at it from a very logical perspective of like, okay, intention versus effect are two very different things. And we got to watch a 6-minute interview with the director before watching the film. And for those who are incredibly opposed to the film, I would just encourage you to watch the 6-minute interview with her that's on Netflix. Yeah. And it's really good, and you see the heart and the intention behind it, and the fact that she researched for over a year interviewing actual preteens. And so her heart was to actually reflect what's happening, not to speak some crazy message to encourage exploitation of children. It was, I need to convey this story. And I thought it was very, very well done. And growing up as a dancer myself, I really understood the culture that they were speaking to, not even from a young girl perspective, from the dance world perspective as well. So I appreciated it. I thought it was great. Yeah, I could go on.
Yeah. I mean, and just disclaimer to add on to that, I would encourage anybody who's listening, if you are curious about the film, I would encourage you to watch it. I don't think it's fair for you to draw conclusions based on what we're saying or based on what social media is saying. Like, you need to go experience the art for yourself and decide where your line is.
Absolutely.
So that's just my overall blanket statement about the film in general, is that you don't make judgments about something that you haven't seen. But I went into the film with an idea of how I was going to perceive it. I definitely went in thinking, this is art, she's portraying a story, she's commenting on an issue that she wants to bring light to. And at the end of the film, I ended up realizing, like, it was very jarring. And I realized, oh wow, like, that is uncomfortable. There were several scenes where I was feeling that discomfort and wouldn't exactly probably have made those choices if it were my own film. But that being said, I still related to the message of the film. I could still speak to the quality of the film as a whole. There's a reason that it won at Sundance. I can say that. And I would also say that those feelings of discomfort that I was going through were intentionally placed there. You were supposed to kind of walk through this film and sort of experience that disgust, because that's the whole point. Is like, this is the culture that 11-year-olds are growing up in. And before we dive in, actually, I want to just give everybody an overview of what we're talking about. So we've seen this film. It was incredible. It was a piece of art. Well done. It's about spoilers, by the way. It's about 4 11-year-old girls. The main character is a Muslim, and she's also a young adolescent, preteen. Is that the right word?
It's preteen or tween.
She's a tween. So she's coming into womanhood, and she gets her period halfway through the film. She's kind of experimenting with what it means to be female, what it means to have sexuality. And so she gets involved in this group of young dancers who are very mature in the way that they're dancing, and their clothing is very, what could be considered scandalous. And so throughout the movie, she kind of goes full into this lifestyle, and she changes her clothing, and she kind of rejects her religion in a way, which, by the way, her religion is telling her that her body is an evil entity that, might prevent her from getting into heaven, But in the, I think it says in the, in women's bodies, that's where evil dwells.
Yep.
Or something
I
like
do
that.
remember something along those lines.
It was, evil dwells in the bodies of uncovered women. There will be more women in hell because of this.
Yeah,
that's what it says.
So she's dealing with that, which, like, on one hand, her body is inherently sinful, and then she kind of goes on a deep dive into the opposite end of the pendulum swing, where she's like, whatever, and she wants to be cool, she wants to be pretty, she wants to be seen, and at the end of the film, she kind of rejects both, and she kind of goes her own way, and she wears an outfit that is neither scandalous nor very Muslim looking, and kind of forges her own path. So the film is meant to comment on this ultra sexualization of young girls at that age, and then also the anti-sexualization of young girls at that age, and how as women we have to navigate that at 11 years old. And so the criticisms that have come as a part of it are basically saying that it was an exploitation of 11-year-olds because of the way that it was filmed, that these girls are dancing provocatively, that the the camera is, pointing out parts of their bodies that should never be pointed out on young girls. And so there's a campaign happening right now on social media to cancel Netflix because this film is pornographic in a sense and an attractor of pedophiles to the Netflix audience. And so that's kind of the basic overview of what's happening for anyone that's not aware. And that leads me into our next question, which is, how do you reconcile your feelings about the film with the sentiment circling social media to cancel Netflix?
I mean, personally, I'm pretty anti-cancel culture. Not because I don't believe in justice, but because it creates this idea of once you've crossed a line, there's no way to be redeemed. And it's like, okay, you messed up, now you're done. You're off the docket forever. And again, I came at this from a very investigative, let's know what we're talking about. Again, I have a dance background. Granted, was this routine more sexual than, the routine in the film that's in question? Was it more sexual than anything I personally have done in the dance world? Yes, it was a lot. However, if it was happening with 16-year-olds, would we all be freaking out? We're still talking about minors. Anything under 18, I believe, should be treated this more similarly. Not the same, because it's not the same, but in a more similar fashion. I also do disagree with, if, is there a possibility that this could be hard for some people that struggle with potentially being attracted to younger children? Yes. But if they are looking for pornographic material, they are not finding it from this movie. Or at least that's my opinion. They are fully clothed. Yes, they are dancing provocatively, but they're covered. So I think we have to come at this from the perspective that it is a film, and the point is not young girls should be dancing provocatively like this. The point is girls are dancing provocatively like this in our culture.
And culture is rewarding them
and
for
culture is rewarding them for it. Culture is telling them, this is what women do, this is how you're mature, this is how you grow up,
this is how you get likes,
this
on
is how
Facebook,
you get likes.
Young
And
kids are on
Facebook.
Facebook.
What's Facebook?
Instagram, Snapchat, whatever.
Yeah, and it is rewarding, and it's a commentary on modern day culture. So that for me is the kind of the line. Also, it's rated what is it?
It's TVMA, which is
TVMA.
the TV equivalent of being rated R.
Right. So this is not intended to be a fun family film. This is for adults to have perspective and understanding. So I am looking at it from that perspective personally, and I think you can't dive into this without really exploring the whole dance and even cheer culture of, when you look at, high school cheerleaders that are dressed in tiny booty shorts and sports bras and potentially dancing as provocatively as this, okay, now is that wrong? Should we be exploring and canceling the whole culture?
Yeah. And maybe we should.
Maybe.
But is that the film's fault?
No.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you talk about the social media backlash that's been happening with this, because I didn't see any social media backlash because I guess I don't follow people who were posting about it. But I think that, similar to what you were saying earlier, people are very quick to make a judgment off of something that they've just read on social media. And I think that there's been a lot of misunderstanding of this film because of that. Mm-hmm. I've been reading a lot of testimonials of people who have talked about the film and the ways that it actually really deeply impacted them, and the ways that they connected with it and related to it and felt represented in it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really, really powerful, and we're discrediting that if we're going to cancel Netflix because of this.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, on the topic of canceling an entire company like Netflix because of one film, which Netflix actually didn't even produce. They had no hand in it. They're just hosting it on their site like they do with many films. But I think if you're going to do that, you have to cancel every other movie production company as well, honestly. Like if you're going to go to this side of it, you have to say, okay, well, Disney has made films that are racist, has made films that are sexually exploitative to women, even if they weren't children, that are sexist. So has Paramount, so has Universal. Every movie production company has. And so I don't think that it's necessarily fair to Netflix to say that. But I also don't think that Cuties necessarily falls into the same category as those types of movies. And I also think that it's difficult because, I mean, obviously none of us are experts on pedophilia.
Yes.
Or on what goes on inside of a pedophile's mind or anything along those lines. But I honestly think that it's not necessarily the director's responsibility to ensure that somebody doesn't get turned on by these children because she's showing a truth.
Yeah.
And I think that if somebody is already seeking out like images of children, they're gonna find them in other places. Yeah. Netflix is not going to be their source of child pornography.
That's good, Emma.
Well, I was going to bring up Kimberly Johnson is like a local woman who actually therapizes sex offenders and pedophiles and also victims of sexual abuse. And I had a lot of people tell me, like, go read her stuff because she's very convicted about it. And so I did. And she posts about how, like, these are sort of like gateway, I don't know, materials. The stuff in Cuties is very similar to what you'll find on a pedophile's computer in a court case. And they say, like, oh, it's just French film. And it's actually, like, leading into greater, worse offenses, which and her conviction is just like, we can't be like creating content like this, we can't be exploiting children like this, and I relate to her and I understand her sentiments, but I don't think we're applying that logic universally. Yes. I think well, first of all, I have an issue with shifting our entire culture to accommodate for the few and far between who are criminals and need help. So I don't think the rest of us need to censor commentary on issues that exist just because like somebody else might be brought into sin because of it, essentially. Like we make films about war, and we make films about Black brutality, and we make films about other rape and other plights of the human experience that are very visceral and raw and offensive to watch in our culture, but we accept them as commentary. But I think this whole portion of it being, but they're kids, is where people are getting hung up. And I mean, that to me just opens a whole nother can of worms. It's like, okay, well, if you think these kids are being exploited, then are they being exploited in tween dramas? Are they being exploited in, the Disney Channel?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Nickelodeon?
I'm not saying they aren't, but we're talking about like an end to children being in film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or any sort of drama.
I mean, I was actually Googling the other day videos from the Disney Channel show Shake It Up. If you guys remember that one. It was a dance TV show with Zendaya in it, and
Bella Thorne.
I was Googling some of the dance moves because I was curious to see how they danced in that show. And oftentimes they were more covered up than the cuties were in the movie Cuties. But they had some pretty provocative dance moves, and these are girls that are in nearly the same age bracket as the cuties, and it's for children to watch. And I'm not saying that Shake It Up was a bad show because of that, but I think that in the same way that maybe Cuties could be seen as like a gateway for pedophiles, I think a show like that could be seen like that
Definitely.
as well.
Definitely.
And so that comes around to what you're saying. Like, does that mean we just exclude children from Hollywood in total? Like, do we take that out? Because I feel like that's a little bit dangerous. Because then you can't tell stories like this.
Yeah.
You can't tell the stories of children.
Yeah.
And the ways that they've been impacted. And you also don't give children role models to look to who are teenagers or whatever that are like them, that they can say, oh, like, this person inspires me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they see, like, I saw like Hannah Montana on TV and I was inspired by her. I was like, she is a performer and she's like doing these amazing things, and I loved to sing and all of this stuff. Like, she was an inspiration in a lot of ways, even though it sounds kind of silly, but
It's not silly.
yeah,
I
it's-
loved Hannah Montana. Like,
No,
as
I
a
get
child,
it.
you're
It was
like,
awesome.
this is amazing,
Yeah.
or High School Musical, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you're watching these, and it's an you're seeing yourself in it, and so I think maybe because this is more hard hitting or something, it feels more dangerous or provocative, but it's actually just putting a mirror onto our society.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't like looking in the mirror
We
Yeah.
at what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And that's
I-
the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back around to, you know, our whole episode, our episode 1 on modesty, of like, if it's our job to make sure that we don't put anything out there that would cause someone else inner conflict,
Sure.
temptation, whatever, then we're essentially saying it's our responsibility to make sure you don't sin. And it's removing responsibility from the individual. And honestly, like, if you are struggling with that kind of a thing, with attraction to children, like, get help. Like, you should have resources and be empowered to go get help, because like brushing things like that under the rug, like, isn't good for
Yeah.
any mental health
Because
Yeah.
just like
topic.
you're saying, there's people that, like, we have movies that show rape, and there's people that get turned on by seeing rape and then
Yeah.
may be more inclined to go and rape somebody. Or you see movies that show violence and have children in them. Like, how are the children being affected by that? Like, I think of, I think it's called First They Killed My Father. It's a movie about the communist takeover in Cambodia, and it's all centered around this young girl who's an actress in this, and she's like portrayed in the movie. You see children be blown up, you see people dying, you see piles of dead bodies, and even though this was on a film set, like, how is a child going to have the like psychological capacity to really even process that kind of thing? And so, but I also think it's important to tell those stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said too, the violently minded could watch a film like that and be
And say, I'm going to go
could be brought
shoot up
into
a place.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember when 13 Reasons Why came out, the first season. I have not seen the second 2 seasons, so I can't speak to that. But it was a series about suicide, and it was very criticized for glorifying suicide as an option, when in fact the intention of the producers and the director was to bring awareness to how, like, implicit it is in our children's lives and our teenagers' lives. It's just a part of it.
Yes.
And the solution is not to pretend it's not there.
Yes.
And it's important that we talk about it.
Yes.
However, I don't know, I don't know if this is true, but I heard the impact of the film is that, like, there was actually a spike in teenage suicides after the series came out. And so it was like the intention of the artist turned into a bad thing, but is there more awareness about suicide now, maybe?
Yeah.
Do we have parents now who are more equipped because they understand how easy it is for it to, be placed in the mind of a teenager? I don't know. But the point of the series as a whole is like, hey, we need to draw attention to this very real problem, and we're going to tell it in an honest way, and it's not going to make you comfortable.
Yeah, I agree. And as someone who has known multiple people that have committed suicide, like, I can't help but think, like, oh, you know, if these stories were being told sooner, could that have normalized a conversation for them? Because these people, you never would have guessed. You would have had no idea until it's happened. But as you were talking, Emma, about other movies that portray other violence, I remember the first time I watched Blood Diamond, proceed with caution, but I remember feeling sick for days after watching this movie about the diamond industry in other countries and the true brutality of how other countries can experience the effects that we might not be aware of at all growing up in America and being American. And I think it's important to show holistic stories and experiences that are not our own. If we are uneducated and unaware of what's happening in other cultures, not to mention our own, even though because this film is about, you know, more Western culture, but portrayed and filmed in France, I think it's like being uneducated and unaware doesn't serve anyone.
Well, and I think our Western reaction to this film speaks not only to our ignorance to like what's happening around the world, but also just our ignorance to film as a worldwide medium. In that I studied film in college, and I watched City of God, which is highly criticized for glorifying violence when it's actually commentary on violence that exists in Rio de Janeiro. And I think if Americans, Christians, whoever had a grander perspective of what film is talking about and the topics that it's going into and the different levels of comfort people have with portraying certain things in different cultures, we might not think Cuties is the worst thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
I think Christians would be shocked to know what's in most foreign films. I guess I'm surprised that it has elicited such a, I don't know, angry and passionate response when there are so many other films out there that, you know, probably you could be just as angry about.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that the director, I was about to try to say her name, René Ducois. One of the things... I'm sorry if you're listening, director of Cuties. We really liked your film.
It was really good.
Anyways, she mentions in her interview, like, she is, just like the main character of Cuties, she is Senegalese French Muslim. And so she's coming from multiple cultures, and she sees the ways that Western cultures, European and the North American cultures have criticized things like Muslim culture for oppressing women. And she says she thinks that actually this way that women are sexually exploited and expected to be very sexual is the West's way of oppressing women.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking also as you guys are talking about how this is an opportunity to actually spark conversation, I think about the ways, so like just to outline for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, you see young girls watching very sexual music videos that are perfectly accessible and whatever. You see them doing video chats with strangers, which is like, it's one of those random video chat services. And you see them twerking and trying to emulate this ideal that they're seeing in society. And they're also trying to seem grown up. And there's a lot that goes on with that. And I see myself in that because at their age, at 11 years old, I was on those video chat services, like trying to flirt with boys that were way older than me and not showing my camera so they wouldn't know that I was 11 years old. I was exposed to masturbation. I was exposed to pornography. I was watching Shakira and Fergie dance in music videos and trying to emulate them. And as an 11-year-old, you aren't even thinking of that necessarily as a sexual thing. You're thinking of it as something that you're seeing as a power thing, that like women are given power if they do this. But then you also see a the backlash in the movie of when the main character Amy gets too sexual, she's then a slut. And so then she's trying to figure this out. But then when she, in the beginning of the movie, is very covered and is kind of innocent to all of this, she's seen as a loser at school and is made fun of. And so it definitely speaks to that push and pull of like of being just sexual enough. But an 11-year-old shouldn't have to think about that at all. And I think that if I had been able to talk to my parents about that, which not that my parents were very they were very like open to me like having, I guess, like they were not totally against me having like sexual experiences, but I didn't feel safe to talk about it just because it seemed like a shameful thing. And so if for example, if my parents had access to a movie like Cuties and had seen, oh, this is all happening to my daughter, then I think it would have been really beneficial because they could have brought the conversation to me because I wasn't able to bring it to them, you know? And so I think that the hope of the director is for that to be the fruit of this, is to bring conversations out and realize, because I think a lot of parents think their children are a lot more innocent than they are and don't realize how much they really have access to.
And that's a really good point. You cannot wait for your kids to bring these things up. Like, you as the parent, I mean, I am not a parent, but I have been parented, and you can't wait, because if you wait, then it's already too late, and you don't get to help set that narrative for healthy conversation with your child and in the home. It's so important. And honestly, for me, picking up throughout the film, I felt a narrative as well of she really wants her mom to stand up for herself. And she's like, well, mom's not standing up for herself. I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm going to empower myself in this way. And in the end, you actually see her walk away from both the overly modest and conservative and the overly sexualized. And in that process, you feel this regaining of innocence. And I think that is really beautiful and kind of sums up what the director was trying to say. Like, it's not about being overly conservative and it's not about being overly sexualized. It's about a happy medium that you are empowered, but you also know your value.
And I want to speak into this overly modest portion of the film, which is not as much at the forefront, but I think especially for, you know, the conservative Christian Western view, we need to talk about, which is that covering up an 11-year-old sexuality and pretending it doesn't exist is doing an equal level of damage on the opposite end. And so to all those people out there that want women to disappear, to have a singular personality, to be one-dimensional, which no one is overtly wanting that, but actually Christian film is communicating that message. And Christian films are portraying one-dimensional female characters that exist only in support of their main character husband or spouse. Husband or you know, or pastor, or, you know, whoever the main character of these cheesy Christian films are. It's this man, usually white hero, and then he just has his supportive wife at home who, you know, stands in solidarity for whatever he's doing. I mean, even the Jeremy Camp film that came out recently, I Still Believe, is supposed to be a film about Jeremy Camp's wife, but it's about Jeremy Camp, and his wife is going through cancer and being, you know, prayed for and trying to support her husband in his career, but the film is about him saving her, and she just sort of, her character just sort of like lets him, and she doesn't really have a voice, or she doesn't really get to talk about her struggle going through it or anything like that. And so I think the thing that initially angered me when I was reading through all of these social media posts, cancel Netflix, is I was like, okay, so you want to cancel an honest, raw story, but you're okay with sanitized, anti-sexualized stories about women who actually don't have a soul? You're okay with that? You're okay with that message going to your young girls? So I don't want to let that not pass through as we talk about that, is that that's also a very important thing that particularly Christian conservatives need to think about and talk about.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that your daughter, your wife, your sister, you as a woman, you have a complexity of thoughts and emotions, and you are going through this world, navigating that. And so we need stories that tell that story.
Yeah, just holistically, that holistic feminine perspective. And I think the church's modern, to be frank, incredibly outdated view of the supportive wife, it is damaging. And I mean, when you look even at this film, I mean, she gets her period at like 11. I got my period at 11. Like,
Yeah.
Your daughter can now grow a human and has sex hormones flooding through her body. Like, you can't just like sanitize that.
Yeah.
Because she is going to be so confused. Your young children are going to be so confused and not understand, and that creates fear. And where there's fear, there's going to be more confusion, and you just can't run away from those kinds of conversations.
Well, and you can't stunt her maturity.
No.
You can't just pretend it doesn't exist, because it does.
Yeah.
And if you shut it down, how is she supposed to grow into a mature, fully, sexual woman when she gets married?
Yes. Because then you are leaving it up to her. You're leaving it up to her to figure it out and to learn and to explore. And if you do that, then who knows what she could learn that would be damaging, because she's just trying to learn and figure it out. And I mean, I really feel for young people in this generation because of that specific thing. They're being left to figure a lot of things out on their own.
I think what this all boils down to is just the question of, is it more important for art to be honest or to be holy? Where do Christians draw the line on what is too honest and what is not honest enough?
It's a good question.
I honestly, I don't think that those things have to be separate. I think that honesty is holy.
Yes.
And I think that if we look at the Bible, and you look at the story of the woman who was caught in adultery and brought out, dragged into the city square naked before Jesus, he didn't say, we need to cover you up so we don't make any of these men stumble that are around here because they're going to see your naked body. He said, I'm going to bring justice to you, woman who is naked and caught in adultery, and call out these men who have embarrassed you. And I think when you look at that example, Jesus is leaning into both honesty and holiness. And I think that the reality of Christianity and of the example of Jesus was to look at tragedies and perverseness and all these things that are quote worldly, and to actually look at them and recognize them rather than look away. That's why he ate with prostitutes. That's why he ate with tax collectors and sinners and all these things. Like, I think Jesus would have watched Cuties, like that's what I mean, maybe that's a bit sacrilegious to say, but whatever. He's seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is that Jesus knows intimately the plight of young women who are going through these things.
Yes.
And I don't think it's wrong for that director to have told that story.
No.
And as Christians, we have the privilege of telling the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And so when we come in contact with these types of brutal, visceral, provocative images, it creates opportunity for us to talk about the solution.
Yes.
And the Savior. And
Yes.
and what makes that holy is the redemptive blood of Christ.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that Christians, a lot of Christians, but then also just people who maybe aren't as educated about art, expect for a film to tell them exactly how they should feel at the end of it,
Yes.
or to give them a very literal way of looking at the film. And so a film like Cuties that leaves a lot sort of open to interpretation, or that isn't as explicit in saying like, this is the wrong thing, this is the right thing. Like it's just showing truth, and truth is messy. Truth doesn't always look like black and white the way that people would like for it to be. And so I think people get frustrated when it's not explicitly explained to them, which is what we see in a lot of Christian films that are not good. Like there's no complex storytelling happening, and it's not a true reflection of reality.
Yeah, or humanity for that fact. And I love what you said, that, you know, you don't have to separate holiness and honesty. They actually go hand in hand. And I think we have treated humanity as very inherently sinful, and perhaps we are. I'm not here to talk about that, but I think looking humanity in the eye for what it is and continuing to have compassion, I think that's what it's about. Like, we can't remove our compassion from humanity, because once we do, like, what are we doing here? You know? Yeah, I think that was really good, Emma. I love what you had to say.
So good. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, women beings, all of you people out there, watch the film. I would highly recommend it. If you are triggered by this kind of imagery, don't.
Yeah, have self-awareness.
But when it comes to the question of should we cancel Netflix, I don't think I think that's over the line. Unless you want to cancel
everything,
all
media.
Yep. All media, children being portrayed in films, dance, cheerleading.
And for those of you who care deeply about these issues and really want to tackle it, don't cancel Netflix. Go into being an activist for the root issues that are causing these types of stories to exist. So tackle the hypersexualization of women and objectification of women. Tackle the extreme anti-sexualization of women and covering of women's bodies for the sake of, you know, men's personal righteousness. Tackle those things, and then we can create a better society where women don't have to grow up in this confusing world where they have to pick one or the other in order to be accepted.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
That's
and I'm going to continue to come back around to this. If you are someone that is attracted to children, get help. Absolutely. Like, don't think about people's opinions of you. Just go get the help that you need.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for being with us today. We are very passionate about this. We had a great time watching the film and talking through all the complexities of what's too much and where's the line. And at the end of the day, like, we live in a world of gray, and it's really hard to navigate. And so I respect all of your decisions and thoughts towards it.
I think that it could be, if you've grown up feeling these ways, as like feeling that tension, it'd be a great movie to watch with your mom.
Yeah.
I've recommended it to my mom to watch, and to be able to have that conversation of being like, hey, this is actually how I felt with all of this, and the ways I grew up with this, and being able to have that open up, even if you're an adult now.
It's really good. Yeah. So, you know, proceed with caution and with discernment. And we'll see you next time.
Be sure to follow us.
Follow
us on all our things.
Please.
Yes.
I wanted to acknowledge, too, we have 100 Instagram followers now.
We have
109, I think, is the number right
thank
now.
you, everyone.
So, yeah, thank you for
We were
following
excited
us.
to hit triple digits.
Yeah.
And
we also have a review.
yes, we have reviews on our Apple Podcasts, and then you can also leave comments on our YouTube. So please keep engaging, keep commenting on our posts. Like, we really love all of you guys' feedback.
It
and
means the world.
It really does. So until next time, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.